Two grandpas went on a morning walk. Only one returned. Houston double murder. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. It was just another quiet morning in the suburbs of Houston, Texas. Sunlight filtered through the oak trees at Willow Bend Park, the jogging trails still wet from an early mist. Birds chirped, neighbors sipped coffee on their porches, and the two old friends, Robert Freeman, 74, and Elijah Martin, 72, walked side by side, as they did every Tuesday for the past 7 years. They were known in the neighborhood as the grandpas with matching caps. Elijah wore a cane. Robert brought a thermos of black coffee. They'd talk about everything from their old service days to the rising price of eggs. That morning, they joked about Robert's new hearing aid and Elijah's latest attempt at baking banana bread. Nothing was unusual. No signs of danger. By 7:30 a.m., several witnesses saw them entering the wooded path behind the park's community center. By 9 a.m., only Robert Freeman walked out, alone, and he was covered in blood. When a nearby jogger saw Robert stumbling down the paved path near the pond, she assumed he'd tripped. But when she got closer, she saw the red stains on his shirt and the far-off look in his eyes. Robert was shaking. He mumbled something about a fall, about Elijah still being in the woods. When paramedics arrived, they found Robert seated on a bench, staring ahead, lips trembling. His blood pressure was dangerously high, and he kept asking the same question. "Did you find him yet?" Police cordoned off the trail and began a grid search. At first, they assumed Elijah had suffered a medical emergency or possibly wandered off. But at 11:47 a.m., a K-9 unit led officers to a section just off the beaten path, down an embankment near the creek. There, under a broken branch and wet leaves, they found Elijah Martin's body. He had been stabbed multiple times, mostly in the chest and side. There was no wallet, but his wedding ring was still on his finger. There were no signs of a struggle nearby. No drag marks, no defensive wounds. Whoever had done this was fast, focused, and angry. Back at the station, Robert Freeman was placed in an interview room. Blood still speckled his jeans. His hands trembled. He kept muttering, "We were just walking. I don't know what happened. I turned around, and he wasn't there." Detectives began to sense something wasn't adding up. Why hadn't he called for help immediately? Why were there blood stains on his sleeves if he claimed he never saw Elijah fall? And why did it take over an hour for Robert to walk back to the trailhead when the crime scene was less than a quarter mile in? By the next morning, blood spatter analysis came back. The blood on Robert's cuffs was not transferred from a hug or attempted aid. It was projected, suggesting close proximity to the victim during active stabbing. DNA on the knife hilt recovered in a trash can near the park restrooms came back as a partial match to Robert Freeman. Fingerprint smudges were found on the blade, though incomplete. It was starting to look like a possible double murder attempt, where only one man survived. Robert had no criminal record. He was a former firefighter, a decorated community volunteer, a grandfather of 6. He'd been best friends with Elijah Martin for decades. The two attended the same church. Their families vacationed together. They shared Sunday barbecues. And now Robert was sitting in an interrogation room, being asked if he murdered the man who gave a toast at his 50th wedding anniversary. It didn't make sense. Or maybe it made too much sense. Detectives dug deeper. When they pulled Elijah's phone records, they found dozens of recent texts between him and someone named Denise K., Robert's daughter-in-law. Digging further, investigators discovered that Elijah had been loaning money to Denise, thousands of dollars, without telling Robert. One message, sent 3 days before the murder, read, "I hope this doesn't come between me and Rob. He's a good man. He just doesn't know." Robert had no idea that his best friend was quietly entangled with his family's finances. And that was only the beginning. When financial records were subpoenaed, investigators discovered that over $47,000 had been transferred from a joint retirement account shared by Robert and his late wife to a private, untraceable Cash App account. That account was tied to Elijah's name, and Robert had just found out the night before the murder. He had told his daughter, "If this is true, "I don't know who I can trust anymore." She assumed he was talking about the app, but detectives now believed he might have been talking about murder. Robert didn't flee. He didn't confess. He sat silently as officers read the charges. And when asked if he needed a lawyer, he simply said, "I just want to go home. We were going for a walk." But Elijah never made it back. "This wasn't just a stabbing," the coroner whispered. "It was personal." When Dr. Miriam Vasquez stood over the body of 72-year-old Elijah Martin, something in her gut twisted. In over 18 years as Harris County's senior forensic pathologist, she had seen domestic rage, gang retaliation, even ritualistic violence. But this crime was something else. There were no random wounds, no frenzied overkill. What she saw was controlled, targeted, and coldly intentional. And yet, Robert Freeman, Elijah's closest friend, still claimed he didn't see a thing. But the truth was about to speak louder than either of them. Elijah's cause of death was officially listed as multiple stab wounds to the chest and abdomen, but Dr. Vasquez's report went much deeper. Here were the details that stunned investigators. 7 total wounds, 5 clustered tightly over the left ribs, 1 deep puncture near the kidney, and 1 slashing wound across the inner forearm. No defensive wounds on his hands or arms, suggesting he didn't see the first strike coming. All wounds inflicted by a 4 to 5 inch single-edged blade, consistent with the kitchen knife recovered from the park trash bin. Time of death estimated between 7:40 a.m. and 8 a.m., just 20 to 30 minutes after the pair were last seen entering the woods together. But here's what chilled detectives most. The final blow wasn't in the chest. It was a single precision stab to the side, angled upward, piercing Elijah's spleen. A wound that would have taken anatomical awareness to inflict. Someone didn't just want Elijah dead. They wanted him to bleed out, quietly. The knife recovered from the public restroom trash had its serial number scratched off, its handle wrapped in what appeared to be old cloth from a torn t-shirt. Forensics extracted. Partial fingerprints. Unusable. 2 strands of hair. 1 matched Elijah. 1 unidentified. A faint trace of industrial lubricant, the kind used in mechanical repair shops or HVAC units. That detail, tiny and easy to miss, would become key later in the investigation. But at this stage, police were focused on motive, because Robert Freeman was either the most unlucky witness in Houston or a man with a carefully rehearsed story. Investigators dug into Robert's recent financial history. 2 things stood out. He had recently filed a complaint with his bank regarding suspicious retirement withdrawals. A month before the murder, he had taken out a $35,000 home equity loan, but no renovations had been done. What had he needed that money for? Why was he suddenly draining decades of carefully saved retirement funds? And what did Elijah Martin have to do with any of it? Then came the tip that changed everything. 3 days after the murder, a local dispatcher flagged a misrouted 911 call from 7:56 a.m., the morning of the crime. The caller didn't say their name, just a trembling voice. "There's a fight in the woods, 2 old men, one of them's yelling. Something about the money." Then it just stopped. The call disconnected before the location was confirmed. But the time? Right in the middle of the estimated window for Elijah's death. Detectives traced the cell tower hit. The call had originated from a burner phone purchased at a gas station, just 4 blocks from Willow Bend Park. Now the case had 3 variables: a victim, Elijah Martin, a possible killer, Robert Freeman, and a third unknown presence. Because here's the question: who had that burner phone? Enter Paul McRae, age 41, a local handyman, known in the neighborhood for odd jobs, car repairs, and lawn work. He'd done minor work on both Robert and Elijah's homes in the past year. And guess what? His garage had containers of the same industrial lubricant found on the knife. He had a misdemeanor for theft from 2019, and he was spotted in Willow Bend Park that same morning by a jogger, wearing work gloves and a blue bandana. When questioned, Paul said he was just passing through, on his way to a job nearby. But phone records painted a different story. His burner phone had pinged the same tower as the 911 call, and he had no active jobs scheduled that day. Now the question was flipped. Was Paul McRae just a shady bystander? Or was he the real killer, and Robert was covering for him? Robert was re-questioned the day Paul's name came up. But this time, his demeanor had changed. He was no longer shaking. He was silent. He invoked his right to an attorney and refused to answer any more questions. His lawyer released a short statement. Mr. Freeman is devastated by the loss of his dear friend. He had no role in Mr. Martin's death and fully supports the ongoing investigation. But behind closed doors, investigators began to suspect a conspiracy. Could Robert have hired Paul? Could Paul have ambushed Elijah over the money? Could they both have been in on it? The case was unraveling, and the motive was now more than personal. It was possibly criminal. That's when Robert's daughter, Caroline Freeman, came forward with something shocking. She handed detectives a sealed manila envelope she found in her father's study. It was marked, "To be opened if something happens to me." Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, "Elijah was stealing from me. I trusted him. If this ends badly, check the bank records and the old ledger in the garage." This wasn't an accident. It was dated 4 days before the murder, and signed Robert J. Freeman. So now the picture was murkier than ever. A lifelong friend dies during a routine walk. His best friend may have left a death note, but was covered in blood. A handyman with a criminal past was nearby and may have made the 911 call. And the murder weapon was linked to both men, yet belonged to neither. The autopsy had opened a door, but what was waiting behind it would shake the neighborhood. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the most chilling evidence isn't what you find. It's what someone tried to erase. By now, the Houston Police Department was neck-deep in a case that no longer looked like a simple stabbing between old friends. It was layered: money, betrayal, possible blackmail, and a second man no one could fully explain. Elijah Martin was dead. Robert Freeman was silent. Paul McRae was hiding something. But then, detectives received a quiet knock on the door from someone no one expected. The tip didn't come from a neighbor, a friend, or a local jogger. It came from Angela Wu, a 29-year-old graphic designer who worked remotely from a 2-bedroom apartment directly across from Willow Bend Park. Angela wasn't a true crime fan or an aspiring detective. She just had a Ring camera on her window to monitor package thieves. The camera was angled toward the street, but on the morning of the murder, it captured exactly 16 seconds of motion-triggered footage that could change everything. Angela pulled it up on her phone and showed it to detectives. Timestamp: 7:48 a.m., October 14th. Location: Willow Bend Park parking lot entrance. Content: a blurry figure, male, medium build, wearing a blue bandana and work gloves, crossing behind a parked SUV. Direction: walking toward the wooded trail. Vehicle: a silver Dodge Ram truck, parked just outside camera range. Audio: muffled shouting in the distance. Then silence. Angela paused the video. "He looked like he didn't belong there," she said quietly. "I work from this window every morning. I've seen those 2 old men a dozen times. But this guy, I've never seen him before." Investigators froze, because the man in that clip, he matched the exact description of Paul McRae, the shady handyman with no alibi. As detectives circled Paul, they also followed the money. Remember the $47,000 transferred from Robert Freeman's joint retirement account? Well, now they had a lead. It turned out Elijah had deposited $10,000 of that money into an independent escrow account used for private real estate deals. And the listed co-investor? Paul McRae. The two had apparently been involved in an under-the-table land flip, a scheme where Paul would acquire foreclosed properties through backdoor deals, and Elijah would front the money. But Elijah hadn't told Robert, and Paul hadn't told anyone. When officers raided Paul's garage, they found 2 burner phones, a set of digital ledgers on a USB drive, and a notebook containing a handwritten entry. "He owes me. R's asking questions. Need to clean this up." Paul's arrest wasn't just inevitable. It was imminent. On October 17th, 3 days after Elijah's murder, Paul was brought in. The first 45 minutes of questioning were routine. Name, age, occupation. Then detectives placed Angela's ring footage on the table and hit play. Paul leaned back, arms folded, face blank. That's not me. Next, they dropped a photo of the USB ledger. Silence. Then the bank transfers. Paul swallowed hard. And finally, they played a snippet of a phone call between Paul and Elijah, recorded by Elijah's phone just 8 hours before his death. Elijah, Robert found out. He saw the missing funds. I don't know what to tell him. Paul, tell him it's an investment. Tell him it's growing. Elijah, he's angry, Paul. You don't know him like I do. I think he's gonna call the cops. Paul, then we fix it before he does. That line, then we fix it before he does, changed everything. Paul was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice. But here's where things got even darker. Because Paul insisted he didn't kill Elijah. He claimed Robert did. In his sworn statement, Paul said he had gone to the park that morning to confront Elijah, not to hurt him. I was mad, sure, but I didn't even bring a weapon. He said he waited in the trees, watched the two men enter, then called Elijah's phone from the burner to get his attention. He stepped away from Rob. I walked up. We talked. I told him to tell the truth. That's it. According to Paul, Robert followed shortly after and overheard the conversation. He flipped out, accused us both of stealing. Then he pulled a knife and went straight for Elijah. I froze. I didn't move. I ran. It was the first time anyone claimed to have actually seen Robert commit the murder. But was Paul telling the truth? Or was this his final escape route? Detectives weren't ready to take Paul's word at face value, so they returned to the ring footage. Angela's camera had a cloud backup system, and when they reviewed all the motion-triggered clips, they found something strange. At 8:13 a.m., approximately 25 minutes after the suspected time of death, a figure was seen exiting the trail, carrying what looked like a plastic bag. The figure was wearing a red jacket. Robert Freeman had told police he wore a gray sweatshirt that day, but when forensic teams examined the plastic bag found in the public trash can, it tested positive for both Elijah's blood and traces of red synthetic fiber. Someone had changed clothes, and someone had tried to dispose of more than just a knife. Robert had told police that after Elijah disappeared, he walked back to the main road in a panic, but the timeline didn't add up. Here's what we now knew. He was seen at the trail entrance at 9:01 a.m. Elijah was presumed dead by 8 a.m. The ring footage showed someone leaving at 8:13 a.m. Takes less than 10 minutes to walk that trail. So where was Robert for nearly 45 minutes? That was the question detectives brought to his attorney. And that's when Robert's legal team went silent. They refused further cooperation, and the DA prepared the next set of charges. By the end of the week, both Paul McRae and Robert Freeman had been officially charged. Paul, accessory to murder, fraud, conspiracy. Robert, second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, financial misconduct. Both pled not guilty, and the trial date was set for early next year. But even now, there's a question that haunts everyone who's followed this case. What really happened in those woods? Elijah's funeral was held the same week Robert was indicted. His widow, Ruth, sat in the front pew clutching a photo of him in uniform, surrounded by grandchildren. And on that photo was a note. He was the kindest man I ever knew. He didn't deserve this. One day, the truth will come out. In Chapter 4, we'll hear directly from Elijah's family, explore Robert's past and a mysterious letter sent to the DA that claims both men are innocent and the real killer is still free. Sometimes, justice takes a sharp turn with nothing but a letter. The courtroom was still quiet, the community still shaken, and the Freeman and Martin families, once practically blood, were now split by suspicion and the brutal mystery of what really happened that morning in Willow Bend Park. Robert Freeman sat in a county cell awaiting trial for murder. Paul McRae was awaiting trial for conspiracy and fraud. And the memory of Elijah Martin haunted every headline. But just when police and prosecutors thought they had this case in a box, A letter arrived at the Harris County District Attorney's office. A letter with no return address. A letter with no fingerprints. A letter that changed the direction of the entire case. The envelope was handwritten. Inside, typed on old inkjet paper, was a single-page message. Robert Freeman didn't kill Elijah Martin. Neither did Paul McRae. The knife wasn't theirs. The motive wasn't money. It was silence. Elijah knew something, and someone wanted him gone. The truth is buried with a man named Wesley Kane. You're looking in the wrong place. Start with the 2004 investigation into Willow Bend real estate fraud. Robert and Elijah were witnesses, not thieves. Now someone's cleaning up old witnesses. Check the ledger. Signed, a friend who can't speak aloud. Detectives and prosecutors scrambled to verify the letter's claims. And shockingly, Wesley Kane was real. Former real estate broker, convicted in 2005 for fraud, wire transfers, and falsifying escrow documents in a land scam involving elderly residents in South Houston, including Willow Bend subdivision. Served 12 years in prison. Released in 2017. Died in 2021, ruled accidental overdose. One of the witnesses who testified against him in court, Elijah Martin, and another name was on the original witness list but later withdrawn without explanation. Robert Freeman. After a court order was issued, police returned to Robert Freeman's home and located the old ledger mentioned in his pre-murder letter and the anonymous tip. It was found in a locked toolbox in the garage rafters. Inside the dusty red binder were names of real estate transactions, partial bank routing numbers, handwritten notes marked WC laundering through title company. Elijah refused cut. Paul equals pressure man? But what stood out most? A 2004 note scrawled in the margin. If anything happens, it's Wesley, or whoever's still cleaning up for him. The note was in Elijah's handwriting. For weeks, the Martin family had avoided cameras. But now, with these new revelations, Elijah's grandson Tyrese Martin stepped forward. He agreed to speak with KHOU 11 News, and the video went viral. My granddad was not a perfect man, but he was a man of conscience. He testified because he saw people getting hurt. He didn't take bribes and he didn't keep secrets. If someone came back for him all these years later, then none of us are safe. Tyrese confirmed that Elijah had mentioned someone named Paul in the months leading to his death, describing him as the middleman who kept asking questions and someone I regret ever trusting. But he never mentioned Robert as a threat. Instead, Elijah told Tyrese, "Rob's like my brother. If anything happens, tell him to read the ledger." With this new evidence, prosecutors were faced with a decision: double down on Robert's murder charge or reevaluate the entire theory of the case. At a closed-door emergency hearing, the district attorney's office admitted the following: the letter, while anonymous, aligned with verified past events. The real estate ledger contained names of current businesspeople still operating in Houston today. Paul's bank records showed incoming wire transfers from a shell company linked to Wesley Kane's former partner, a man named Reed Mallory. And most of all, there was now credible doubt that Robert Freeman stabbed Elijah at all. But the case still had holes. Who was the man seen on Angela Wu's Ring camera? The man with a red jacket, leaving the woods with a bag full of bloodied evidence? Was it Robert, or someone wearing Robert's clothes? Angela reviewed her full security archive again and noticed something strange. At 6:57 a.m., more than 30 minutes before Robert and Elijah entered the park, a man wearing a ball cap and red jacket was seen pacing near the public restroom, then ducking into the trees before either grandpa arrived. The footage was grainy, but the timestamps didn't lie. Whoever that man was, he was waiting. Then came a final piece of evidence, small, almost missed. Angela's Ring system included audio logs, and one clip from 8:01 a.m. revealed a yell captured in the background. "You said no one would get hurt." Two voices, one yelling, one low, almost whispering. It wasn't Robert. It wasn't Elijah. It wasn't Paul. It was a fourth man, someone still unidentified. But when Paul heard the clip in custody, his eyes widened. He whispered, That's Reed. Reed Mallory, the man who used to partner with Wesley Kane. A man who had never been questioned. Until now. Within days, investigators subpoenaed Reed's financials. There it was, a $15,000 withdrawal 2 weeks before the murder, deposited in Paul McRae's account, labeled consulting fee. Then, cell tower data showed that Reed's phone pinged from near Willow Bend Park at 7:05 a.m., the morning of the crime. It was the final nail. The DA announced that charges against Robert Freeman would be reconsidered, pending further investigation. Paul McRae's charges were modified, no longer seen as the primary actor in Elijah's murder. But as for Reed, he vanished, gone. Phone off, house empty, bank account frozen. 3 weeks after the murder, Elijah Martin's case had gone from a simple stabbing between friends to a conspiracy spanning 2 decades, involving dirty real estate money, false identities, and a killer still at large. And now, with one man cleared, one still jailed, and one gone without a trace, the question remained, was Elijah the only target? Some killers don't run. They circle back to make sure the past stays buried. 3 weeks after Elijah Martin's murder and the unraveling of everything the public thought they knew, the case was no longer just a neighborhood tragedy. It had grown into a web of hidden money, real estate fraud, betrayal between lifelong friends, and one man, Reed Mallory, who vanished into thin air the moment his name was linked to the crime. Robert Freeman was out on bail. Paul McRae was still behind bars. Elijah was gone, and Houston, Texas, held its breath. But then, on a rainy Thursday morning, police were called to Robert Freeman's home. His daughter had arrived to check on him and found his back door kicked in. Nothing was stolen, but what they found in the living room would ignite a final chain reaction. Robert, traumatized by his arrest and still shaken from public scrutiny, had quietly installed a motion-activated security camera in the corner of his living room. The device uploaded to a secure cloud, and at 2:08 a.m., the night before the break-in, it captured a figure moving through his kitchen. The man wore gloves, a baseball cap, and no mask. He didn't speak. He didn't take anything. He walked through the house slowly, methodically, then stood in front of Robert's desk for almost 3 minutes, staring down at the top drawer. And then he looked up at the camera and smiled. Facial recognition enhanced the clip. It didn't take long to identify him. Reed Mallory, the man who disappeared after being tied to the land fraud ring. The man whose voice was heard on Angela Wu's Ring audio shouting, "You said no one would get hurt." And now, the man who had broken into the home of a man he once tried to silence. Why didn't he kill Robert that night? Was it a warning? A threat? Or something more twisted? It wasn't just old financial crimes. Investigators, with help from federal agents, discovered something chilling. Reed Mallory had been laundering real estate profits through elderly proxy investors since 2002. Elijah and Robert were both nearly pulled into that scheme but backed out after discovering its full scope. Wesley Kane, the broker convicted in 2005, took the fall. But Reed never stopped operating. He simply changed business names and used new middlemen. Paul McRae was one of them, and when Elijah found out Paul was still tied to Reed, he tried to walk away again. The theory was now complete. Reed asked Paul to apply pressure on Elijah to stay quiet, perhaps even repay his investment. Elijah refused. On the morning of the murder, Reed arrived at the park first, hiding near the trail entrance. Paul met Elijah briefly to discuss the pressure, but didn't expect what came next. Reed ambushed Elijah, stabbing him in silence. Robert arrived moments later, found his dying friend, and tried to help. That's how blood ended up on Robert's clothes. Panicked and confused, Robert wandered for nearly 45 minutes, unsure of what to do. Meanwhile, Reed cleaned up, changed clothes, and left through the opposite side of the park. The perfect frame job, until one thing ruined it: the camera. Within 48 hours of the break-in, a nationwide warrant was issued for Reed Mallory's arrest. And less than 5 days later, acting on a tip, U.S. Marshals tracked him to a cabin in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. where he had been hiding under a fake name, using cash-only transactions. Inside the cabin, they found a duffel bag containing $18,000 in cash, multiple IDs, a second burner phone containing photos of Robert's house, and a journal entry dated 2 days before the murder. E is cracking. If he flips, I'm next, or doesn't know everything. P is panicking. Gotta act fast. It was game over. In a rare court statement, Robert Freeman finally spoke publicly. Elijah was my best friend. We served together. We raised our kids together. I wish I could have saved him, but I forgive the men who tried to destroy us. I won't let hate finish what fear started. Paul McRae's charges were reduced, and he was sentenced to 18 months for wire fraud, but cleared of murder conspiracy. Reed Mallory now faces life in prison without parole for first-degree murder, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Elijah Martin was posthumously honored by the Texas State Bar Association for his bravery in testifying back in 2005. And Robert? He went back to walking the same trail every Tuesday, alone, but never afraid again. Some crimes are easy to understand: jealousy, rage, impulse. But some, they stretch across years. They hide behind paper trails and handshakes. They make you doubt your eyes, your friends, your memories. This case wasn't just about a man killed in the woods. It was about how the past always finds a way to come back, unless someone's willing to face it. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.